Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to our chat today. As you're funneling in and you're getting started, feel free to open up the chat, introduce yourself. This is also going to be a great test to make sure that the chat is actually working. So open up the chat, introduce yourself, name, role, institution, and then optional, of course, share one thing you hope to gain or learn from today's session. So we're going to go ahead and get started with some housekeeping as folks are able to introduce themselves. Webinar recording, the recording for today's discussion and attendee certificate will be shared with every attendee within the next 2 days. And then you can access all recordings at pacback.co/webinars. And then please, if you have questions, ask them in the Q&A feature, and we'll prompt you in the chat every once in a while, but feel free to use the chat as your whiteboard for the day. Use the chat to share reflections, ideas, and then questions in the Q&A. So as you're coming in, please introduce yourself in the chat. Happy to have you here. All right, so let's do some introductions with my wonderful panelists today. My name is Kelsey Berenger. I'm the CEO of PackBack. I started my career in the high school classroom. I taught chemistry and physics, and my brief stint with advanced academics was the AP chemistry course, which I don't think I've ever felt so challenged as a professional in my entire life. So excited to have this discussion today. I'm joined with two wonderful panelists. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. Mark, would you mind doing a brief little intro?
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I am Mark Ingram. I'm a K-12 curriculum coordinator in Marion County Public Schools in Florida. I too was a high school teacher, English and reading, for about 12 years, and now I've been in this role or in the district office in Marion County for about 8 years as a literacy coordinator. And now oversee advanced programs, and I'm just happy to be here. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much. And then James.
Hey, I'm James Lane. I'm the CEO at PDK International. And before that, I was the delegated acting assistant secretary over the Office of Elementary and Secondary Education in the Department of Ed. Before that, a state superintendent in Virginia and a district superintendent in 3 districts, of course, a principal and a teacher. But excited to be here with Kelsey and the team from PackBack.
Nice. Well, welcome. All right, so agenda for today, we're going to talk about the critical nature of advanced academics. Then we'll talk about challenges and how we could potentially approach those challenges with AI, but also be very mindful about the way in which we're incorporating AI into these programs and really, I'd say holistically into all districts. With any time available, we'll of course aim to have a little Q&A. So I'm going to launch a poll briefly just to get lay of the land and get some immediate sort of perceptions. I want to make sure I have the right poll going. I'm going to launch it right now. It is multiple choice. It is, what challenges do you see in most advanced academics? Mark all that apply. Limited access to resources and feedback, equitable access to advanced academics, lack of student writing proficiency or achievement, a gap in student achievement. So while you're answering the poll, I will say I was 100% the AP chemistry teacher that knew that I needed to assign writing to prepare my students for the writing portion of the exam. Took 3 to 4 weeks to get my students graded feedback and graded papers back. And then by the time I gave them that graded paper, all ability to apply the feedback went out the window. So that was my experience. Unfortunately, it got better by the end of my teaching tenure, but first year AP chemistry teacher, that was a tough time. Was not leaving the house much on the weekends. It was more so grading in front of the TV. All right, I'll give everyone about 1 more minute to reply. And by minute, I mean a few more seconds. Awesome. I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. Seems like it's a good mix of results. I'll keep them shared for a moment. But I want to go ahead and pass it to our panelists to talk about the importance of advanced academics. So obviously, if you're familiar with these programs, it's of course important for our students to prepare them for college and career, and then for our districts, we might have accountability metrics around these programs. But James, curious to hear from you, in your time in Virginia as a district leader, and then at the DOE, what were the importance of these programs and why was it so important to drive enrollment in these programs?
Yeah, thanks. And we approached advanced academics in a lot of different ways. I can remember when I was superintendent in Goochland, Virginia, we created one of the first entire 2-year degree programs inside our high school, which, is a lot more common now, but in 2012, that was a little bit more rare. And parents were really excited about the idea of their kids graduating and going into the 4-year university with really the 2 years of general studies behind them. And parents really saw that as a college affordability opportunity. That I would always tell students, look, you're still going to go to college for 4 years, but maybe you'll earn a master's degree. But we still want you to have the college experience. And later on, when we were kind of tweaking graduation requirements, we made it essentially a requirement that you had either an AP, an IB, or a work-based learning opportunity. So we gave, some opportunities for all students to meet that requirement. And, time and time again, what we saw is that kids that had advanced academic opportunities were much better prepared for college. Yes, that it helped with college affordability, but like I said, we still wanted them to go for a full 4 years. But what it really did is it set them on a pathway so that when they got to the university, they were much more confident about their abilities. We had given them a really strong background in writing and critical thinking and some of the things that you don't always get in the traditional high school courses. And we gave them a level of depth and understanding around some subjects that we thought was challenging, especially some of our more advanced learners. And so for us, it really was about making sure that kids were prepared for career readiness, college readiness, and all the opportunities in front of them. And where we could, sure, we wanted to make it cheaper for them as well over time.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember too, in my high school experience, it was almost like unthinkable if you didn't graduate with at least one credit, right? And get a head start on the curriculum or the pace or the rigor that you were going to experience and whatever was next for you. So Mark, curious to hear, drive a couple 100 miles south from Virginia, you get to Florida.
Few hundred, yeah.
Yeah, a few hundred. I'm also trying to think, like, do I have to go a little bit east, west? Geography was never my strength. I was an AP chemistry teacher. So, Mark, curious to hear in Florida, what do the importance of these programs mean to you and specifically in your district?
So to build off of what James was saying, we can bank credits and save money off college, and that really creates opportunities for students who may not be able to afford it. In Florida, we've also I was a beneficiary of it. We have the Bright Future Scholarship paid for by our Lotto Fund. We had a shift in the past decade, though. Basically, a 40th percentile SAT score used to be good enough to get a student that Bright Future Scholarship to pay 75% of their tuition. And now they've shifted it to closer to an 80th percentile score. So parents who had a kid 10 years ago in college versus one now have that expectation that their student get that SAT score, and it's just less feasible for some students. But luckily in Florida, we've got diploma options where you could complete a Cambridge program or an IB program, and then you're able to earn that Bright Future Scholarship through their testing process without necessarily earning that SAT. And we're finding that as a really good pathway. We've got a couple schools that are literally getting hundreds of kids scholarships that way, and we just find that awesome. And then on top of that, with our school grading system, we are encouraged to find opportunities for every student to take a college or career program in school so that they're able to earn credit. And we really find this creates opportunities for a lot of students to see things that they may not have encountered in their core curriculum and really take to things and sort of set them out on a pathway to success.
I think too, Mark, I didn't realize that change in the expectation of that scholarship. We actually have our director of engineering got that scholarship, UF alum. Shout out Susie O'Brien. And I think it's also interesting in that I think we're going to start seeing things like that become more and more competitive. So a little bit disheartening because it's not like if everyone wins, everyone wins. It's you have to make sure you prepare your students for whatever applicable opportunity they can find. So let's pivot a little bit. I think we can all agree on the importance of these programs in one way or another, and that regardless of state, there's a really strong desire to get enrollments increased in these programs. But once we increase enrollments in these programs, or if we hit our enrollment goals, how do we make sure these students are successful is a big question. And I think we could all agree that in these programs, there are a lot of lot of challenges we face, the challenges that the students face, the educators face, the districts face. So I want to hear from y'all specifically. What problems have you been facing? And I'll just start here by sharing something I found on the internet, of course, which is principals' confidence in student preparation for college and career readiness. And this is the percentage of principals that feel confident that their students are college and career ready. And you can see high poverty districts are disproportionately affected by this. But clearly there's a gap between access and then success. So Mark, would be curious to hear from you. You know, in your district, what are the biggest pain points your advanced academics programs or maybe educators have today, and what problems are you really trying to solve for?
So sometimes it's, I'm looking at the slide too, the poverty cycle that influences itself and kind of becomes a snake eating itself. I always say you can tell your schools are doing well when your teachers are filled with graduates from that school. So sometimes what we struggle with advanced studies is finding qualified teachers for those topics. We have a hard enough time at times finding a physical science teacher for our ninth graders. Then we really can't find an AP chemistry teacher that really has that content knowledge. Or if we find somebody with that content knowledge, they may not have that pedagogy, that understanding of how to get that across to students, let alone that specific knowledge of that assessment in that course. And really it can just be a struggle finding that. And then we're also trying more and more to be more inclusive and build more opportunities for students to take these courses. Gone are the days when you could have an AP calculus class with 6 kids sitting in it, and they were all guaranteed to pass essentially because they'd been pre-tested and screened and vetted. I was in an AP calculus class yesterday, and we had 35 students in there, and we still have high expectations for their scores. But we know that the teachers got a challenge in how to teach and reach all of those students who may be coming from different places and different skill levels.
Yeah, James, curious to hear.
Yeah, just you know, kind of, I want to piggyback on something that Mark said there. And I think it's partly what the data on your screen is saying here, that yes, we have to have enough teachers credentialed, but it's also have enough students for the courses to make. And I think that's why when you look at schools with less than 300 kids, you're going to have access issues to some of those courses because they're not going to have as many students to fill out a full calculus, physics, chemistry, biology, you know, all of the programs that some of the larger schools would have. Another challenge that we faced is that, and I talked a lot about, you know, parents really want more of these advanced academic opportunities. That they're seeing it, again, as I mentioned, as somewhat of a college affordability issue, but it's also a GPA thing, right? That most schools give you some type of bump in the GPA, at least the weighted version of the GPA, and that can often lead to you being maybe more interesting to the admissions offices at schools. But the other thing that parents are clamoring for is the portability of these credits, right? That, you know, generally AP, IB, maybe Cambridge in Florida, the credits are very portable. Dual enrollment credits and concurrent enrollment credits are not always as portable, especially if they're coming from a community college level course to a university course. And so we tried to pass legislation in Virginia to address that. But when I think about preparing students for success, in addition to, you know, the access pieces, the biggest gap that I saw as an education leader was in students' writing abilities. That I felt like the likelihood of you being successful at whether it's dual enrollment, AP, IB, whatever it was, the better that students were prepared with writing skills, you know, from 5th grade through 8th grade and then on into high school, that would translate in my mind into better success on these college level opportunities that are offered in high school. And, you know, writing is not an assessment that was mandated by the federal government. And so it varies from state to state which grade levels actually have writing preparation. And one of the things I fear is that as we kind of double down the focus on the science of reading and everything that's happening, I want to make sure that there's a balanced focus on writing because it has so much more applicability as you think about, not more, equal applicability to reading in the way that students are going to be successful. And when I talk to, hiring managers at big firms, they're thinking more and more about students' mathematical analytics skills side by side with their writing and communication skills. And so that's something that I think about. And then the other pain point for us was that making sure that we had done the training with our teachers of these advanced academics courses to make sure they knew how to deliver lessons, or at least support student-centered experiences that took students to a deeper level. That it's not about answering a multiple choice question. We really want to know that you deeply understand the topic and can translate that. And those were the two big pain points that we heard from teachers and students, is that there was a wide variety in how folks approached writing, and then that led to different outcomes, and then how folks approached the level of the rigor of the course and how fun and rigorous they could make that at the same time.
Absolutely. I'm also thinking about my time as an AP chemistry teacher, the amount of effort I had to put into the lab experiment portion. And it was extra hours, right? And I had only 45 minutes with these students. So it was often staying late, because you have to give them the opportunities to actually build critical thinking skills through active learning, regardless of discipline. So one thing I've heard, I'm going to shout out a Packback user in high school and college. He teaches at Virginia Commonwealth, and then also a public district down the street. Keith, you know who you are, Keith. We were chatting about his experience teaching. He does IB and AP, and he does English, and then I want to say also a college readiness course. I'll have to look back at my notes, but one thing he said is he's been teaching for a really long time. It almost seems like every single year the students entering his 11th grade, 12th grade class, they're getting further and further and further behind in their writing proficiency. The ability to edit, the ability to communicate, it's just getting harder and harder. So I'm curious, I don't know if y'all have thoughts on, 2014 versus today. How has student preparation and writing skill really changed? What do you feel like are some of the reasons it's changed? And how can we maybe, I'm throwing this at you, but how can we start thinking about those, variables as we start to actually think about how we want to change and get our students more prepared?
So from a K-12 lens, and to build off of something James was talking about earlier, we have sporadic writing assessment. We have one statewide for every grade level in Florida, but it doesn't count for anything, so it goes by the wayside. But to me, it's such a big piece of critical thinking to have students write, and to have students really have to explain themselves and show their thought processes. And what we wind up doing more of is sort of multiple choice test prep, because it's a little easier to grade, it's a little easier to prepare, but it doesn't necessarily show student original thought.
Yeah, and I think that we do live in a world where the assessments that come mandated from the state do tend to drive instruction. And we had a situation where just before I became state superintendent, they had passed new assessment rules that actually reduced one of the required writing assessments. And going in, I thought that was a mistake. The rule had already been passed, so we dealt with it. So one of the things we started to think about when I was there is, okay, can we bring back a focus on writing by maybe integrating writing into the reading assessments? And then I left for the federal government, but they have since implemented that. And I thought that was a really positive move by the team that I was working with at the DOE. But ultimately, I think AI is going to change the landscape here. And I think that for years, we've relied on assessments that essentially you can Google the answer. And so we, don't want students Googling the answer, so you don't allow it. And then, you get a sense of whether they knew the multiple choice answer. But I think AI is moving us past that, where teachers are going to have to give analytics, and especially in advanced academics, right? But analytics focused type of projects and activities side by side with writing types of activities. And sure, AI can help with your writing a lot, but at the end of the day, if we can make sure that we ask the questions in a way where you can't quickly prompt an answer, but instead have the student relate to a personal experience or tie it to what they know and drive that into the story, we can be certain that it's their original work. And that's the biggest piece of advice as we kind of move into this AI world, is that we've got to make sure that students are being asked to do original work, and original work is going to be where we can get an assessment of how they're doing.
So that's a great segue. Thank you, James. That was perfect. Because I want to talk about what role AI can play in advanced academics. This is an area in which I'm incredibly passionate, the intersection of education and technology. And as somebody who was a AP chemistry teacher and now fortunate enough to be the CEO of this company that empowers educators and students with AI, but I'd love to just hear maybe Mark, if you want to take us away, and then we'll pass it to James to maybe fill in any blanks. But, based off your own experience with AI, based off of your educator's experience, maybe even something that you haven't tried yet, but it exists or is possible, what role do you think AI can play in advanced academics, specifically solving some of the problems that you have in your programs?
So James was talking earlier about just the amount of things we're able to Google now and things we can learn that way. You still have to be able to process that information. So I think no matter what with AI, there has to be an implementation step or a correction step or a usage step. We used to think, math classes would be unnecessary because we had calculators in our pockets now. I don't know if you've ever seen the SAT or ACT math through your adult eyes. A calculator would still not help me a whole heck of a lot with that because I still have to bring my knowledge and everything to it. We have started using, we have teachers that are using AI to generate prompts, or they're using AI to polish up lesson plans, to determine what vocabulary in a passage might be challenging for students to stop and teach, or to look for words that have morphology we can teach alongside with our state standards. But we're so early in this and figuring out how it's going to look and what it's going to be like. I was in school during the birth of the internet, not the birth, but the explosion of the internet. I was an AOL kid. And I never would have imagined that the internet being in our pocket and us instant messaging all the time would just be how we would completely live our lives and really work our jobs in the future. So I think we're still kind of unpacking the possibilities.
Yeah, James.
So interestingly, one of the things that we do at PDK is we poll the average American on their thoughts on public education. We've been doing that since 1969. And for the first time this year, we asked some questions around AI. And now the average American is not, we didn't just ask teachers, or we didn't just ask parents, or we didn't just ask principals. This is the average citizen, but we segmented it a little bit where we were able to see what parents thought versus the average American. And what we heard was that there's overwhelming support that AI should be used for, say, lesson planning. Overwhelming support that it should be used to help students that are falling behind, like tutoring. There's support that it could be used to prepare for assessments, like standardized tests. But what the average American said over and over again is they don't think that AI should be used to help students with their homework. Actually, only 40% of the average Americans think that AI should be used for students' homework. Now, some of that could be that, it's not all people directly connected to schools, and they don't know how AI is being used on a day-to-day basis. But I think what's behind that is they don't want AI to replace student original thought. And so my son started school last week. He's a ninth grader, and he's taken an AP computer science course as a ninth grader, which is, I think, is an appropriate course for a ninth grader. Some of the other courses are maybe a little too advanced for his age, but one of the things he has to do is to, a major project over 2 years at his school. And he used AI to develop the ideas, right? So I'm interested in this. He had to do something that was a causal study versus a correlational study, and it has to be something really longitudinal over a couple of years. And so he used AI to kind of refine his thoughts, and then he would ask his teacher questions, and then he would circle back, so on and so forth. And that's where I think there's a niche for AI. It should help you understand the concepts you need to know to develop the project, but it shouldn't actually do that critical thinking, that project type work for you. And that was something that I really thought helped play a role. But kind of back to that thing that they were saying about teachers being able to use it for lesson planning. AI should definitely be used to make life more efficient for the students and the teachers, while ensuring that we're getting the level of deeper learning and rigor out of our students. So yes, let's take all the work that goes into lesson planning. Let's take all the work that goes into students thinking through their projects, and let's just get to working on the project. But the other part of it is, I think that it allows us to assign a lot more depth to our students, because teachers aren't going to have to be grading until midnight for 2 weeks to get feedback back to students. We can get immediate feedback to the students through AI, and we can use that made up time to have a conversation between students and teachers about how they can shape that to a better product. So that whole sense of taking time, giving it back to teachers so that we can go deeper is really where I think it has an exciting opportunity in advanced academics.
I think back to the headline I read, it was opinion piece, and it was Bill Gates saying that AI is going to be like the best teacher you've ever had, that walked you through your complex problems, helped you. And I think we're already there, really, with a lot of different applications of AI being able to bring feedback forward. And there's also a huge value proposition when we're talking about teenagers. Their receptiveness of AI telling them that they've misspelled a word versus their teacher going, hey, you had a typo there. There's just something about the depersonalization of, like, feedback on syntax that I feel like students don't skip a beat. They're like, yeah, I'll listen to a robot. And then that preserves the meaningful feedback for the educator. I'm going to share two thoughts on AI in this space, and both are really related to the educator. How do we make their instruction more effective, but then how do we also save them a little bit of time? There's this term at Google in their engineering, like, coding handbook called toil. And toil is also a term in, like, manual labor, but it's the work you do that's not strategically exciting. It's easy to make automated. It's manual. It's tedious. It doesn't make you happy to show up to work every day. So we have a goal at PackBack to boil our toil with AI pilots to try to see what different parts of our workflows. And I think that's a huge opportunity. And again, those tools exist today of how can we start boiling the toil for our teachers? We know we need to retain them, especially when we have a great teacher. We cannot afford great teachers leaving the classroom for so many different reasons. So how can we make them more effective, and how can we make them more efficient? And I think giving them tools to really automate some of their processes, lesson planning, whatever it might be, but then also use AI to do things like make their lesson plans and their assessments more rigorous. That is something AI can absolutely do. So I'm obviously very passionate about the use of AI in the classroom, but that is me. I'm curious to hear from folks in the audience in the chat. How do you think AI can be used to help students and teachers advance academics? Curious, James, Mark, any other kind of thoughts on other places where we could be utilizing AI for district advancement, maybe if it doesn't even sit within a student experience or a teacher experience?
Well, I'll jump in.
Good, James.
Go ahead, Mark. Oh, you go first.
I think like you were just talking about losing some of the toil, that's almost a double-edged sword with students and teachers. Is sometimes when things are really challenging, we like to live in the low level parts of it. If I've got to, like, fix a broken door in my house, and I also have leaves to rake, I often start with the leaves to rake, because that's a much easier task than having to figure out lumber and screws and all this stuff. So but that unlocks the ability for students to live in, like, the real struggle, the real strategic thinking, which I feel like is where we probably struggle the most in K-12, is just challenging students and saying, no, you got to figure this out. And we can use tools to create opportunities to do that. We can also use tools to remove barriers to doing that, because we're caught up on the little things that can be handled with an AI tool.
Mhm.
Yeah. When we were pre-chatting before the session, Mark said, we tell our teachers, and Mark, I'm paraphrasing for you, but we tell our teachers, skip the things that can be Googled. And I think that I would say skip the things that can be chat GPT'd. I don't know if that's a verb yet, but I know it will be one soon, or Gemini'd or whatever. But I think that's right. I think ultimately, let's focus on deeper learning. Let's get kids engaging in the content, analyzing, synthesizing, evaluating, project-based, let's put students at the center, let's put kids at the center. And I think that that's really where we should focus our AI work.
And also too, I think I'm going to not remember the name of this, but we're already there as a society. We're there as an educational environment. There's a standardized test that I believe it's ESL students take to test on writing and reading proficiency in English. And I'm forgetting what the test name is, but what they're doing, and I think they've already made this change, is they're actually giving their students access to a chatbot. And of course, it's a filtered chatbot. It's not just Chat GPT as a sidebar, but during the assessment, they're giving their students access to the chatbot, because what they want to do is they want to actually assess the students' critical thinking skills, problem solving skills, analyzing skills, not basic understanding of core content or ability to regurgitate or memorize. So I thought that was really interesting to see that it's already being incorporated in the actual assessment in standardized assessments. So, it's here. It's not like, 10 years in the future, it's happening now. Okay. So want to chat a little bit about, the guardrails that we need to set, and also just the amount of awareness we need to have as we're thinking about incorporating AI into classrooms, specifically into advanced academics classrooms. So I'm going to have a quick poll pop up. Let me do this and see if I could get the poll functionality on Zoom. I can never quite get the series of steps correct. All right, launching it now. Biggest concerns in regard to implementing AI into advanced academics. I think the other thing, and I think the motivation, if folks don't feel it today to get AI into advanced academics, is the reality is that students are using AI-powered tools in college. I know a significant amount of faculty and professors who incorporate either AI platforms or expect the use of AI platforms into assessments, projects. So it's important that we actually prepare our students for college. And that doesn't just mean they're confident writers, they're confident communicators, they're confident critical thinkers. It also means that they're confident, fluent users of AI. So it seems like there's some concerns around misuse, absolutely, data privacy, security, and then dilution of original thought and voice. I'll go ahead and publish these results. So James, I'll pass it to you first as somebody who supported this product from the DOE, but what guardrails do you think we need to make sure are put in place before we're incorporating AI into advanced academic classrooms, specifically as you think about the work you did on this project?
Yeah, thanks. And even looking at the polling results that just popped up here, the quality of what you're getting from AI continues to be a concern. And then number two is always this cheating. And I think that question we asked in that poll around, kids shouldn't be using it for homework, what underlies that is they think that if they use it for homework, that they're just going to, be given the answers and not actually have original thought. And so one of the reasons that the Department of Ed really focused in my mind on this number one is, and it's every time I talk about these 7 pieces that they recommend, I always start with number one and overemphasize number one. You have to keep humans in the loop. Even just thinking about that comment that Bill Gates made, that, AI could be, your kid's favorite teacher or something like that. At the end of the day, AI is not going to replace our teachers. It's going to support our teachers. It's going to support our students. It's going to give them some tools that can help. But the point of this whole keeping humans in the loop is you can't cheat if your teacher tells you exactly how you should be able to use the tools at your disposal. And this, if they're monitoring their students' use of AI and the way that they respond, or maybe even more specifically, asking the questions in a way where AI can't give the answer to the student, but instead forces them to critically think. And I think what as a parent, of a student that is using these tools potentially at school, I don't want AI to develop the lesson plan, deliver the lesson, the student answer the question using AI, turning it in using the tech platform, and that no human is ever in the loop. And so like all of the work that's happening in school actually had no bearing on my child, right? I want humans involved all throughout. And yeah, I might use the tool to refine the project, but I'm still going to make my son do that project. And I hope that, yes, AI may give quick feedback to the student on his writing with tools like PackBack and others, which are so incredible at doing this. But ultimately, I want a conversation between the teacher and the student that where we know how my student is thinking about these issues. And yeah, we should have shared visions in our communities. We should use modern learning principles, strengthen trust, and inform and involve educators. But that last one is number 7. And I know we'll talk about this more. I think we talked about a lot on the last webinar I did with you, Kelsey. But what we need is we need the districts or the government or whatever policymakers to set the guardrails. But once we're inside the sandbox, there should be a lot of flexibility for students and teachers in their academic freedom.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Also, you painting the picture of like writing with AI, submitting through a platform, grading with AI, like no human thought or care was put. That seems like this like post-apocalyptic educational nightmare. I'm already seeing like a great short about it that we can show to our students and like day 1 of class, like don't make this happen. So yeah, thank you for talking about that. And something that I thought of as you were talking about humans in the loop and really needing to make sure that teachers are teachers, I always have said, and I deeply think that so much of a teacher's job is to create an environment for students in which they're motivated to want to learn. Because you can bring a horse to water, right? So like 50% of your job, give them the water and then motivate them to drink. And when I think about what is really required for a student to feel motivated, there's a framework called self-determination theory that I love, and it's 3 criteria for motivation. It's agency and autonomy. And talk about removing autonomy from an experience if you're not even writing it. It's almost impossible to be continually motivated if you're constantly using AI to do your job for you. You need to feel purpose and connectedness. And that's where I think educators play the biggest part, is by helping students feel connected to subject matter, because they get to be the physical representation and also the coach and the cheerleader for that subject matter. And then the third is mastery. And it's the thing, right? If you fail 100 times in a row, maybe you'll get back up. But at some point, if you keep failing, you will stop trying. And again, I go back to this. If we're just having students use AI with absolutely no guardrails and they never actually learn mastery, we have a student who's just going to completely plummet, lack of confidence, and then completely demotivate. So we need to also think through, how do we maintain this psychologically safe but incredibly motivating environment for our students? And having guardrails around AI is definitely a part of that equation. Shout out to self-determination theory. It works in professional settings too. It works in all of life. In your household, it works. But want to quickly shine a spotlight on this Wharton study on AI before I pass to Mark to talk about precisely how Marion has been using AI. But this was an interesting case study in which 2 groups of students, there were a group of students split in half. One group was given GPT, no filter. The other group was given GPT with a filter that was basically programmed to act as a tutor, but not give them the answers. So both groups improved, but the filtered GPT, you could say the GPT tutor group, they improved more. And the reason why was because the improvements started compounding, because they were actually learning as they were going instead of just having a personal assistant. Now, what ended up happening is when we removed those GPT products from these 2 groups, the unfiltered group dropped in performance once we removed that tool, because they were really utilizing it as a way to delegate their work instead of actually be better. And then the group that was tutored, had the filtered GPT, there was no negative impact. So I think it's important as we're thinking about the utilization of AI, it's okay if some utilization of AI is truly just us finding a way to get somebody to do the thing we don't want to do. I love using ChatGPT for making decisions of whether I want to make, tacos this week for dinner or pasta. Like, fine, like, that's great. But we need to make sure that when we're thinking about originality, critical thinking, motivation, that we're making sure our students are building skills through these platforms, through these tools, through these programs, and not becoming dependent on them. So Mark, I want to pass it to you to talk a little bit about how Marion's been utilizing AI for student coaching, but then also making your teachers' lives a little bit easier, right? Not removing them, but just helping them save a little bit of time, give them some sanity back.
Yeah, so I've been presented with this challenge for a few years. We started using in our English high school English curriculum the ACE English General Paper course, and finding teachers and building that out and really finding texts. And to give a little overview of that course, it's a broad writing course where you're essentially tested in 2 ways at the end of the year and can earn college credit. You get a topic to choose, and you have to write an essay in which you discuss that topic in multiple facets. And then you get multiple questions that are just open-ended and ask you things that are just really broad cultural things, like how do arts affect culture, or how is art affected by the culture or by trends of the time? And it's really it asks our students to think more deeply than they're used to. And so we had a real struggle with getting our teachers on board and how to teach that, and then managing that load of having students write that much, because in that kind of course, you're tested on a big essay at the end of the year. You should be writing once a week at least. So if you're a classroom teacher, you have 150 students writing an essay every week, then also working on little pieces of writing on just a variety of topics, either of their choosing or the teacher choosing. It becomes a lot. So when we were first introduced to Packback and we started with just a partial year of it, we really wanted to focus on that group of teachers. We're a medium large district in Florida. We have about 45,000 students. That puts us at 7 high schools. And if you're teaching an advanced course, you're very likely to be the one teacher on your campus of that course. So we brought the teachers together. We trained them on using Packback on both the questions and the deep dives. And we found a ton of success with that, because the teachers really, and this is the bottom line of it, teachers were comfortable assigning that amount of writing to students who were from all different areas of writing skill coming into it. And the teachers were comfortable doing that and using Packback for that feedback, and still having a voice in the grading of the students. I think that's so important. To me as a teacher, the first thing I did when teaching writing was making sure kids met a minimum standard. All right, do your paragraphs have claims? Do your claims have support? Are you following a logical flow of ideas? And AI can handle a lot of that. And I don't know if you've asked a teenager to do anything for you recently, but the likelihood that they're going to give you their best effort right away if they don't know the end result of it is not huge. But when you follow up and you ask questions and you ask them to point things out, like, hey, where is the claim in this paragraph? What point are you trying to make? Where are you getting this evidence from? They pick up their game really quickly, whether or not that's a skill they've practiced before. They start seeing, oh, I have expectations here and I can reach those. Then on top of that, the teacher can then go and score for that voice, for that originality, for how deeply interwoven their topics are. And our teachers really took to it. And as you can see with the data on the screen, it really increased our scores. And to me, the thing I'm proudest of is not the score increases, that we did that at the same time we increased enrollments. We had more students taking the course. We had seniors who had not taken an advanced course or a career credit course until the end of their high school careers taking it and earning a graduation requirement. And that's all thanks to our teachers, like we talked about, the human element, using the tool that was available to them and just asking students to do the same.
I have chills. I didn't realize that these results were at the same time that you had increased enrollments. It's really, really special. And it is 100%. I love my platform, and I think so highly of the individuals that built it and the foundation it was built upon, but it's a tool. And it needs to be wielded by an expert, and it needs to be wielded by somebody who's committed to achieving the goals. And so, yeah, huge shout out to Marion County teachers for crushing that. And I would definitely be intimidated if I had to teach the general paper course. It's a lot of writing.
Yeah, it's freedom to teach a lot of topics, but it's the burden of teaching a lot of topics.
Yes, 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 yes. It's a lot of writing. So I would love to hear, just, as we wrap up, get some closing thoughts from James and Mark, our panelists. And thank you so much for spending time with me. And if you're in the audience, thank you so much for spending time with us. Just your final thoughts on this topic around, what you think about AI, education, the advanced academic space, and maybe if anything today wasn't said or you felt like you didn't emphasize enough, I'd just love to give you the opportunity to connect any final dots. So James, I'll give you the floor.
Yeah, thanks. And Mark, thanks for sharing the Marion story. I know that through this webinar, it's the first time we met. I'm sitting here taking notes. I never take notes when I'm like, I'm just loving a lot of what y'all are doing in Marion. So thank you.
Thank you.
So, for me, the one thing I would say is, and I just kind of hit this at the end, and I know encourage you to look at the last webinar that Kelsey and I did together, but the tools are going to change, right? And even companies like PAPIC are going to continue to evolve better and better as this world happens. You're going to get better and better feedback for students and teachers. And so one of the things I would encourage you, if you're a district or even a state leader, be intentional about the policy space right now. There will be tons of opportunity to select the perfect tool, and they'll continue to evolve. But the biggest thing I think your teachers are clamoring for is to understand, what am I allowed to do? What am I not allowed to do? And I think students are asking the same questions. What am I allowed to do? What am I not allowed to do? Because if you don't tell me, I'm going to use the tools available to me to do as much of the work on my behalf. And then I'm going to ask questions to the teacher, like, did I do this right? Was I allowed to do that? And so clarity around the policy issues of what is allowed for your staff and allowed for your students is going to be essential. And then all of the providers are and vendors and supporters, whatever they partner, they're going to come into alignment with what you allow your teachers and students to use. And so those guardrails around policy are essential. Then I already hit the humans in the loop piece, but I will stay on that focus of make sure that you're changing the way that you think about curriculum to go from being focused solely on knowledge and content to really focused on students thinking and deeper learning. And if you can do that policy piece side by side to the transition to mastery-based learning, I think you'll be prepared for this new world in AI, at least where we are today, because the world is going to continue changing as we move forward, and technology is going to bring so many more advancements to our world. But having a policy structure and an instructional focus will make it clear to your community where you're headed.
Yeah, as a district in Marion, I got to help frame our early draft policy. And our first thing is we wanted to make sure we focused on not banning or disallowing use of it, but to make sure that it was a tool and we still expected original work and for AI use to be cited or to be otherwise noted. So we're not trying to pass it off as original work. And what I would say, based on what you were saying, James, is we just have to be open-minded and ready to see that we're still in early stages. We're still figuring out what these tools can do for us and how to use them. And I think someone in the chat just said students know more than us about this at this point. Yeah, they learn about technology much more quickly than we do. And that's where my Google paraphrase came from, is students know how to Google the answer to every textbook or curriculum product on the market right now. They can find the answers more quickly than some of my teachers find teachers editions. So learning has to go beyond that, and we know that. And I think that's really my thought with the AI tools. It's just showing us that we're moving into a world where some of the simpler things can be managed by tools fairly simply, and what we're learning and what we're teaching and what we're doing has to be beyond that realm of thought and has to be into that critical thinking, which can also be supported by those tools. But like we keep coming back to, that human element is always going to be a huge part of it.
Absolutely. As I'm thinking about next steps and some of these districts. I think one of the common reasons we feel fear is because we don't understand something. So if you're feeling like you're not quite ready to incorporate AI into a student use case yet, and you're not quite ready to incorporate or commit to an entire AI strategy or AI vision, one thing you can do is just make a commitment every single week, or maybe it's every single day, just to learn a little bit more, or just to make learning about AI a little bit more a part of the forefront of strategy, because that's a really great first step, because it'll automatically help change and morph perceptions. But thank you so much, panelists, for joining me, James and Mark. I appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you.
From the East Coast. Hello from Chicago. And then folks who made it to the session, thank you so much for the time. Hope everyone has a fantastic remainder of their weeks. Thanks again for the discussion.
Thanks
Bye,
for having
everyone.
us.
Bye. Yeah. Thank you for having us.